Okay, this video is what are the best jobs for women? Well, issues are different for women. Modern society tries to pretend that men and women are the same. They're quite different, okay? Last time I checked, my guy friends didn't have anything on their chest. They had a totally different plumbing down below. Okay, women are different. Look at the women. They got little small shoulders. A woman's about as strong as a boy in 6th or 7th grade. So they just do not have the physical strength as a man. And there's a reason for that. Because our ancestors, thousands of years ago, everybody worried about starving to death. And if a woman carried a bunch of extra body weight on her shoulders, it'd be harder for her to obtain adequate number of calories. She's just strong enough to control her son until he hits puberty, and then he goes off with the men. That's what's happened for many thousands of years, and that's what has been the typical society. Okay, so nowadays, though, things have really changed. There's been a lot of big money from above that wants to decrease the numbers of the population. So it's doing all kinds of things to gaslight the population. And I think young women in massive numbers are being sterilized, and they just don't realize it. If you study the chemicals in processed food and tap water and personal care products, it's so overwhelmingly estrogenic and bad for the reproductive system. It's not even funny. I don't think it's a coincidence, okay? If you use your brain, if you look at the goals of big money wants the numbers of the population to dramatically decrease by 93% if you go by the famous guidestones that are in, Georgia, okay? It's not ambiguous. This is all in writing, okay? Instead, also the joke about modern society is the women have become very promiscuous and the young men are not happy about it, okay? So this is a joke about how do you choose your wife? Do you either choose, like some totally sleazy woman here, or do you choose a fat woman? Men cannot help it. They are not attracted to fat women. And what's the reason? A lot of fat women, yeah, they're nice. They got a pretty face. But the problem is, in our ancestral society, a woman was not fat unless she was pregnant or she was a grandmother, okay, and no longer reproducing. So it's almost like to approach a woman is physically rather dangerous, okay? She could call her husband, her father, her brother, her son, whoever it is, to come kick your ass. So we don't want to approach a woman. Biologically, we're programmed so. We don't think about it consciously, but we're programmed to not want to approach a woman in a romantic way unless we think we can have a baby with her. So when a man sees a woman from behind, the first thing he notices is her waistline more narrow than her buttocks, okay? Because it's an indicator of fertility. They store omega-3 fats in their hips and their gluteal region. So for a woman to have a narrow waist and relatively large glutes, they don't have to be big glutes, but just larger than the waist, that indicates she's probably fertile, okay? So that's attractive to men. We can't even help it. We're just biologically made that way. We don't even think about it. When I see women, I'll see women walking down the hallway in any place or anything. I don't even think about it. My brain just always automatically asks me the question, would you sleep with her? Yes or no. It's not even a conscious thing. It's just yes, no, yes, no. It just does that, okay? And that's what makes it, puts a woman into the range of possibility. Does she have that hip to waist ratio? Yes or no? Okay, the other thing too is women don't understand that America has traditionally been a Christian country. Okay, its values. It doesn't mean everybody's Christian, but it was fundamentally a Christian country. Okay, and it fundamentally had a lot of respect for the female. Okay, and it respected her person, her role in the family, and basically men left her alone. And you might think that's no big deal and obvious, but that's not how it is in much of the world. If you take a look at travel videos around the world, women routinely in many other places are physically harassed in the street if they are by themselves. And if you read about ancient cultures, women a lot of times were not supposed to leave the house. Often they weren't supposed to leave the house without a veil of some sort. And what I'm telling you is it looks like those times are coming back. Physically, you kind of have the worst of both worlds in terms of being a victim. You don't have the physical strength to protect yourself, number one. Number two, you've got the intrinsic sexual attractiveness that bad men who don't respect your person want you, okay? And so, Douglas MacArthur, the great general, had said, what causes a war? A war is caused by undefended wealth because, a neighborhood tyrant sees undefended wealth and they want to conquer it. So a woman, in a sense, has the ability to pleasure a man sexually, but she doesn't have the ability to physically protect herself other than either she's armed or she has men who protect her. So what I'm trying to say is we are heading back into a third world sort of primitive barbarian-like society, and that is much worse for women in terms of their autonomy and freedom. Okay, getting back to this job thing. Being a wife is a great job. You don't have to be a wife, but being a wife, what I've seen, the happiest women I've ever seen in my life, I grew up a long time ago. I'm an old man, even though I look young. I'm 60 years old, and I can tell you, back in the 1970s, when I was a kid, I would go to my friends' houses, and I can tell you, I never once saw any of my friends, not a single one of them, who had what I would call an attractive mother. Only once, this one guy who was a wrestler, and he lived in a really, really rich neighborhood. His mom was real pretty, and his father owned a company, was a CEO, and she was his younger second wife, trophy wife, okay? That's the only time I ever saw one of my friends have an attractive mom. What I'm trying to say is a woman could be ugly. She could be, a 3 in looks, maybe a 2, okay? And she would have a husband. She wouldn't have to work. And I didn't live in that rich of a neighborhood. It really wasn't that rich of a neighborhood. My family was like the wealthy ones in my neighborhood, so to speak. It was not that wealthy. I call it middle class. A lot of people live in my neighborhood were lower middle class financially. And what I'm trying to say is a woman didn't even have to be pretty, and she was guaranteed money all of her life and didn't have to work. Okay, that's how it was. The country was much wealthier in those days. And so, men don't really want that much from their wife. Most men off the record think they're a lot smarter than their wives. They think their wives are kind of dumb. Here's a typical, Italian contractor guy who I was talking to. He says, my wife, she's basically a simpleton. Okay, I know that's a little mean, and there are a lot of women who are really smart. But in general, women often pick a man who is smarter than them or more competent than them in their area, in a sense, because he helps her. For example, I dated some real smart female doctors. I was always kind of like a babysitter to them. I dated a girl who was second in her medical school class, but I was way, way ahead of her academically, intellectually. And I'm not saying it's always like that. I also know guys who are kind of wild and crazy and irresponsible, and they actually will choose women who are more responsible and reliable and better with money, for example. So, a man who's smart picks a woman who complements him, who makes his life better, who together they're a partnership in marriage and life is better for both of them. But I have seen that pattern. Some of the smarter wild guys picking wives. I had an uncle who was like that. Kind of a little bit of an irresponsible, crazy guy, but he picked a real smart, responsible woman, and they had a real nice family, and things worked out well for them. And, I think one of my brothers is like that. Okay? His wife does him a lot of good. Okay, all right. So what else? What does a man want from a wife? He wants to have sex with her, okay? He wants her to have a kid. He wants her to be cheerful. He works all day being a slave for her. That's why he does it. We do jobs to make money for our wives and kids that we don't want to do. So we'd like her when we come home to at least have a smile on her face. We don't want her to get fat because we're not attracted to fat women. We're just not. We kind of feel like we got ripped off if our wife gets fat because then we don't want to have sex with her anymore, and that's a big pleasure of marriage. So it's kind of like, what the heck? There's a lady by the name of Esther Villar. She wrote a book. It's a very funny book. It's called The Manipulated Male. And she says all kinds of funny things. She says a woman's vagina is like a slot machine to make money. She provides a man with sex and later generates a baby from it, and then she gets money for the rest of her life because of that baby. She keeps on getting money long after her looks are gone. So it's kind of funny, but she says a whole bunch of things like that. That's Esther Villar. Look up her quotes. You will be surprised how funny she is. Okay, men and feminists don't go together. Feminism was promoted by big money, and if you actually study the history of it, you will see it is based on Satanism and all these other things. Because traditionally, going back to the Bible, men and women have worked together and helped each other. They have complementary skills and abilities. Okay, the modern feminism tends to blame men for everything, and they don't work together. They don't like men. Some people have even said feminists are a hate group against men. Men just sort of think, she's kind of a crazy pain in the ass. Okay. And, so they really don't go together. So what I'm trying to say, that's another reason why these young men are not attracted to women like guys used to be. There's old funny quotes like on the lady, Zsa Zsa Gabor. She was this beautiful female actress. She was in this show. I think it was Green Acres or something. It was a funny show. I watched it when I was a kid. But here's like typical things Zsa Zsa would say. And this is way a long time ago. This is like back in the 1960s and 70s. She would say, some women say that men are the problem. I say they're the answer. Then she says, I love intellectual men. They know everything and suspect nothing. I'm a very good housekeeper. Every time I divorce a man, I keep the house. And you never really know a man until you've divorced him. So anyways, that's kind of silliness. But what I'm trying to say is there's a traditional background to this, and it was greatly to the woman's advantage. Women nowadays are sort of encouraged, get more education, get more career. You can do it too. You can do anything a man can do. Work, 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 get a PhD, get a postdoc, do an extra residency, do an extra fellowship. And they keep on delaying their child rearing. And a lot of them are unable to have kids. They become infertile. Also, they lose their looks, a lot of women, and they're not able to attract a man. I mean, one of the advantages with a woman when she's young is they tend to be more attractive, so she's got a better chance of getting a man. If she gets a magic ring on her finger like the Lord of the Rings, she kind of becomes the man's boss in many ways. Because in a marriage, the man almost always wants to have sex a lot more often than the woman does. So she controls that. She controls his access to sex. In addition, if it should come to divorce, she comes out of the divorce much better than the man does. So she's kind of got double power, coming and going. Okay, most divorces are filed by women. It's at least like 75%. And I think that's because women tremendously underestimate the importance of having a father in the house. Boys need a good male role model. Women cannot be a male role model. Women are sort of pampered and spoiled by society. The old joke is, you hear a newspaper story, woman goes missing, it's a big deal. Okay, a guy goes missing, no one cares. And in general, society pampers and favors women totally. Look at grade school. Okay, it's taught by a bunch of women that totally favor a female view of life and female behavior. It ain't normal for a young boy to sit in a desk listening to some lady he doesn't know just talking, yapping at him all day. That's not normal for a boy. Okay, when boys are raised without a good male role model, they tend to become impulsive, irresponsible, lazy, more violent. They tend to do poorly in school. The daughters tend to be sleazy and end up in promiscuous relationships that are damaging to them. It's a tremendous mistake. Mothers tend to provide children with unconditional love, and kids need that. Kids have ups and downs like everybody else, and the unconditional support of a mama carries them through difficult times. That's wonderful. But they also need a father's sort of blunt, brute, objective reality. Basically a father tells his sons, look, no one cares about you. No one is going to provide for you. No one is going to help for you. You better get educated. You better develop some skills, or you're going to be homeless and broke, and no one's going to care. Okay, so that's just the way it is. So do your job and shut up. All right, and so a boy gets that from his father. And the big thing I got from my dad, for example, was a role model. Every day the old man got up early in the morning, worked all day, and then he took the dog for a walk, and then he read books at night and listened to classical music. And my father was my hero when I was growing up, and I think that was very good for me. It always motivated me in school. For example, I was taking a physics class when I was, I think, a senior in high school, and I didn't like it. I was bored. I didn't like it. I wanted to drop the class. I told my mom, I hate this class. I don't like the teacher. I'm going to drop this class. And my mother just yelled at me, and she says, you are a wimp. You are a baby. You are spoiled. Look at your poor father. He grew up in a house with a dirt floor, and he worked so hard to be successful, and you are a coward. You are going to drop out at the first time things become difficult. I'm ashamed of you. And that really hit home for me. I never said another word about that class, okay? I was so embarrassed that my mother put it out to me like that. My father would say things to me like, too, you know what? And when I was your age, boys were sent to the front line, okay? You're so damn lucky you get to go to school, sit around twirling a pencil all day. Just do your job. Consider yourself lucky to get an education. Quit your complaining. Quit your whining, To whom much is given, much is expected. I needed to hear that at times. Okay, getting back to the current situation. About 50% of women at 30 years of age are childless and single. Okay, that's a lot. That's unheard of compared to in the past. Let's see. You don't want to be a chump for alpha phonies. The other thing I see happening a lot, women don't know this. I'm kind of surprised by it, but, women are usually very smart socially compared to men. I think, that's one of the reasons why I like talking to women. They understand things socially much faster than I do. But one of the things I've seen that women don't seem to understand is, some tall, good-looking guy, they routinely have 3 to 5 girlfriends. I've been at places where they had sex contests, where the men, not at my school, but guys who I know at other schools, once was in a high school, once was in a medical residency program. I'm not going to say where it was. But even just off the record sexually, where they would have a contest. So who could have the most sex with the most girls in the next 6 months or in the next year or something, and the numbers were off the charts. You wouldn't believe how many girls these guys were having sex with. And then you will say, well, they're lying, they're making it up. No, they're not. I know it because when I was at Harvard, for example, I had a guy who I had to work with who was this tall, good-looking guy, and he was from another country. He told me, American women are a bunch of whores. I'm just having fun with them for now. My parents are going to force me to marry a woman from my own group, okay, from his own country. And so he routinely had 3 to 5 girlfriends, and he would try to get me to carry his pager, which I did for him sometimes, but I didn't like doing it because these girls are paging him constantly. You know, I have to tell him he's in a procedure, and so I didn't want to do that. But I was amazed by it. He was banging several women in the same hospital. So what I'm trying to say is women don't realize it, but sometimes when they go for that alpha male guy, he's having sex with multiple women simultaneously. He would go to bars, pick up a woman, have sex with her that he never even met before in one night, you know? And see, I think where that comes from is men love sex. We love sex 100 times more than women. And you'll hear women say things like, oh, I love sex, you know, after a nice dinner with a guy I really like. It's really pleasant. I really enjoy it. Okay, fine. The way guys talk is they'll say things like, yeah, I think she's attractive. I would bang her on the bathroom floor while my friend was taking a dump. It's much more physical, less emotional for men. They're attracted or they're not. And don't get me wrong, it's much better to be in love with a woman. It's much better to be in a monogamous relationship and all that stuff. That is true. But I'm just telling you, men are more primitive about sex, and they like it much, 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 much more than women do. More than women could even realize. They're programmed that way. And, you know, an intelligent, good man has self-control. But men in general don't have a lot of self-control. And the reason why sex doesn't happen more often is because women don't want it. They control it. It's something that women tend to, they do. They control it in general. So what I'm trying to say is, though, they end up having problems with these alpha male polygamists because to them, you know, the woman's just a bimbo. She's just a sex toy. They'll pump and dump. And, you know, they very often have sexually transmitted diseases. Sexually transmitted diseases are much more common than people realize. And not just genital warts. A lot of times you can get an infection, chlamydia, or some of these other infections that can slowly sclerose off the fallopian tubes and make the woman infertile. Also, a lot of women have herpes, you know. A really high number of women have herpes, and that's, you know, it's not something the guys want, and it could cause problems with the baby. She'll need to get a C-section, all that kind of stuff. The other thing I've seen is, you know, they joke about prostitution being the oldest profession, but I think that is going to be a much more difficult business for them to make it in. The reason is the computers have the ability to store videos ever since videos were made, going back to whatever that is, the 1990s or something. So what I'm saying is that created unlimited competition on the internet for, you know, porno, okay? So what I'm trying to say is there's an endless number of women who are 9s and 10s and willing to be, you know, gang raped by heroin addicts. So that destroys the woman, turns her into, you know, an STD and a disgrace. And but what I'm also trying to say is it's also a dead end, I think, in the future for women to make money, relatively speaking, because there's unlimited competition. There's unlimited number of women that are perfect 10s and physical beauty that are doing the most unbelievable things. So, you know, no regular woman is going to be able to compete with that and make any money. I don't think so. So that is going down into the garbage can, okay? And nowadays there's even artificial intelligence girlfriends that some of these guys, because a lot of these guys, they've never even been with a woman at all. They've never had a girlfriend. They call them incels, involuntary celibates. There's a lot more of them than you would realize. What else do I see? Yeah, there was sort of a sexual revolution, if you will, since the 1960s, because automobiles enabled people to travel farther away. Rock and roll sort of was one of the wedge, you know, driving force as well for secularism, a move away from traditional Catholic family values, Christian family values, birth control pills, you know, lowering the risk of pregnancy, the internet nowadays making it easier to meet people. And it's led to a tidal wave of promiscuity, but it's led to a tidal wave of sexually transmitted diseases. Okay, and I can tell you in the long run for a woman, the main thing that's going to make you happy is your kids. You talk to all these older women, and every single one of them will tell you the kids and their family is what brought the most happiness in their life. So I think much of the younger generation, a lot of these young females, they're being sterilized. They're already half, if not more, sterile, and they're delaying their child raising until they're, you know, having a child until they're in their 30s, and they're infertile by the time they get there. So I think a woman should be very smart about her fertility and protect it. It's one of the things that you have that a man doesn't have, okay? It's been derided and criticized and made fun of. But the truth of the matter is, you can make a baby. You can get his DNA into the next generation, and he wants that. Okay? So you've got something he wants, and you should protect that because that's a very valuable thing. And if you think it's not, then you're an ignoramus. Okay, nowadays what I've seen too, for example, when I mentioned all those women in the 1970s, they were, like I said, they didn't have to work. They just took care of their kids, and that makes a woman happy, being with her family, with her kids. What I see now is most of the middle class women, they have to work all day at a job. Most of them work full time. Some of the lucky ones work part time. And then they come home to the house and they have to clean the house. Men don't care about cleaning the house. It's just sort of almost biologically programmed into a man not to care about cleaning the house. Some do, but most don't. I can tell you tons of middle-aged women tell me their husband doesn't help with the house. I can tell you I don't help with my house at all. Zero, none. I refuse to ever clean or pick up. And you can say, oh, I'm just a jerk. No, my attitude is I pay for far more than my share. And number two, it's kind of like my wife's house. If we get divorced, she's going to get to keep the house, not me. And she's actually the one who picked to live in this house. And I think it's a stupid house and it's her house. So fine, she can pick it up. She can clean it. I don't care. And she's pretty lucky. Believe me. People say, how could you talk that way about your wife? Let me tell you something. My wife has it so good. I wish I was married to myself. Okay, let's see, what else? So she comes home, though, the typical woman, and then she has to clean her house, and she's kind of pissed off because she's worked all day, and she comes home and she's still got to do more work. She's got to clean up her house, clean up after the dog, take care of the kids, and doesn't have a lot of time for herself. She's exhausted, goes to bed late, she's sleep deprived, a little bit annoyed the next day. Being sleep deprived makes you kind of grouchy. Whereas my mom was like happy. She had fun all day. She played tennis. She was a minister of care. She was on the board of directors at an orphanage. She actually adopted a bunch of people here and there over the years. She adopted a couple girls. She adopted anybody that our family was friends with, and they were having a problem, whatever it might be, someone was sick or whatever. My mom would just say, you come live with us. We would have all these people living with us. And they loved my mother. They would kiss her feet. They loved her so much. She was like a saint, a modern saint. She really was. So anyways, I just tell you that, though, because she had a great life. The best life I've ever seen a woman have out of all the women I met many thousands in my life, was my mother. And let's see, where else are we going here now? What are some other things? Oh, yeah, so the middle-aged women, though, I see now in comparison, they're grouchy and they're pissed off because they're overworked and they're exhausted, okay? And it's just how it is. And the other thing, too, is my mom kept the extended family together. She'd want to call all the relatives and have everybody spend time together versus the current middle-class female wives that I've seen. Most of the ones I've seen, not all of them, but most of them, they're so exhausted that they don't really want to they don't make any effort to keep the extended families together. What are other jobs for women? You could be a servant for rich people because the society's unstable right now. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Things could get much, 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 much worse. So I actually think they're going to. I wish they weren't. Maybe they'll be good in January, but who knows? Who knows? Things could be much worse. Sadly, I would say, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Being a servant for rich people, at least you'll be in a house where there's some food. You won't starve to death. There's a lot of old people that are demented. You can be a caretaker for some old, fragile, often demented people. These are jobs just to pass a couple years. And, meanwhile, bring a book with you and be reading every day and building up knowledge. I actually think for a woman, being a hairstylist in a rich neighborhood is a great job. Now, you will say, oh, I'm an asshole, I'm a male chauvinist, scumbag, all this stuff. Go ahead, say whatever you want. I know what I'm saying is 100% true. The reason I say that is, think about my wife. Why did my wife get to marry me? Because I was lonely, and I was working in a hospital, and she was working in a hospital, and then she, used her superior social intelligence to control me and steal all my money, okay? So what I'm trying to say is, being a hairstylist is like speed dating, okay? I used to go to a hairstylist, and, it always ended up being this big conversation, and eventually, though, I thought, this is stupid. I didn't like going to a hairstylist, so, I got family members now who cut my hair for me, but what I'm trying to say is that's what it was like. It was always like this big conversation. And there's no way those women would ever have gotten to speak with me except the fact they were working as hairstylists. And so if you're working as a hairstylist in a rich neighborhood, you're going to meet one after another man who's been financially successful all day long, okay? And I can also tell you, men tend to be much lonelier than women, all right? For example, if you want to talk about telephone calls. I have to make phone calls at work because I'm working. But when I'm home, like social phone calls, how many phone calls does my wife make for everyone that I make? I would say she makes approximately 1,000 times more phone calls than I do. Okay? Women are intrinsically, in general, much more social. Men are very often very quiet and not that social. We're sort of thinking about something and doing something. And don't get me wrong, the average, not so bright guy is drinking beer, watching sports on TV. Okay, but I'm also saying intrinsically, my father in my entire life, I never ever once saw him make a social phone call. Never. Never. And I lived with him. I lived with the family off and on, my parents, for like 30 years. Okay. I mean, I was away for a little while here and there, of course, for school and stuff. But my mom made all the social phone calls. She had all his friends' phone numbers and would invite them whenever they had a party. Let's say for Christmas, for Easter, Mother's Day, all this other stuff. But I think the point is made. In general, there's plenty of exceptions, but in general, women are far more social. And just think about it, work, okay? If you work with a guy, I can work with a guy for 10, 15, 20 years and not know anything about him. I really don't care about his wife or his kids. If he talks to me and he says, oh, my wife or my kid's having a problem, can you give me some advice? I will do whatever I can to help him. But I don't care. I really don't. And the reason I say that in comparison is if I work with a woman, okay? Let's say I work when I was an imaging guided surgeon. They would hire a nurse, or I go work in a new area and I meet the new nurse. She would right away ask me, so where are you from? Are you married? How many kids you got? Where you send your kids to school? Where'd you go to school? She would do this whole summary of me, and she would know me. She would know all kinds of things about me just from talking to her. And I wouldn't probably know too much about her. I really didn't care. I don't have much curiosity about other people unless there's some special situation. They got, like a guy comes to me and says his mom's got cancer. Can I give him advice? And yeah, I'll help him out. But I don't intrinsically have that much curiosity about other people. I just don't, okay? And, I've been teased that I'm Asperger autistic. I don't think so. And I think that's pretty typical of men because I work with other men. They don't ask me anything. When I work with guys, they don't ask me how many kids you have. What does your kids do? Where'd you go to school? They don't ask me stuff like that. We kind of talk about, we try to have a laugh. We try to get the work done. But the men don't give a rat's ass about other men. They really don't. Okay, let's see. What else? Private school. I think it's a good job for a woman to teach at a private school, preschool or grade school or whatever school, private school. The reason is you can put your kids in that school and that will protect your kids from the evil society in the public schools. Like we talked about this before in other videos, but nowadays, especially boys, man, they get brutalized by the public school system. It's just evil. Like I said, they'll label them as attention deficit. They'll drug them with amphetamines. They'll try to get them to say they wish they were a girl, and they'll castrate them. It's insane how awful they are to children, and especially to boys. So you can protect your children better if you're teaching in a private school or if you homeschool them. Okay. What do I think is a good job? I think it's a good job to be a farmer. I think we're headed towards massive starvation. I think millions of people are going to starve. When is that going to happen? Nobody knows, but I'll predict it'll happen next winter, but nobody knows. So if you're a farmer, you'll be around food, so you'll be less likely to starve to death. You'll know how to grow food. Most modern people are city slickers and don't know anything about traditional ways. America would be better off if we had the old family farms and all that. It's too late, though, for that. Take advantage of affirmative action for women. Okay, affirmative action is intrinsically unfair. It basically says somebody based on their race or gender should be given preference for a job. Okay, now that's intrinsically unfair. And I'm a minority. I'm half Puerto Rican. Okay, so, but I know it's not a fair thing. I mean, all you got to do is turn it around and say, well, should somebody not be allowed to get a job for a certain reason? And you would say, well, that's unfair. Well, of course it's unfair. But what I'm saying is, if you're a woman and affirmative action favors you, like in all, especially these tech fields. Computer jobs can be helpful, but really know how to be a computer programmer or an information technology person or a cybersecurity person, whatever. In general, big money likes to hire females because it sees them as easy to control. Okay? The attitude of big money is especially a woman with a child. They figure she's desperate to support that child. A woman will do anything for her child, so she's going to be easy to control. Men are a little bit more maverick and harder to control because a man doesn't give a shit. He doesn't, in comparison to a woman, and he doesn't even know if the kids are his. Men are a lot more sort of willing to just say, screw this is bullshit, and just walk away from something, okay? So in general, monopolies tend to want to hire females, sees them as easy and passive to control. Whereas a real competitive place, a lot of times, will like a male employee because they see the men as more willing to be workaholics. They're a little bit more money motivated. Like let's say a guy is in his 30s. He doesn't care about having a baby. He doesn't care about working 12-hour shifts, 5, 6, 7 days a week. He doesn't care about skipping his vacation if he's going to get more money from it, because he knows if he raises his status and his money, he's going to get laid. Okay, he's going to be able to get a woman. It's not going to affect him at all. Whereas the woman might be thinking to herself, gee, I spent all these years in school, and now if I want to make partner in this medical group or this law firm or some other highly competitive job, I'm going to have to work 12-hour shifts 6 days a week. I don't want to do that. I just had a baby. I want some time for my child. The child's not going to do so well. Daddy's never home either. So what I'm trying to say is men are more willing to be workaholic maniacs. Okay, and it's just a fact. Look through history. Now, historically, women used to have a lot of kids. In the 1800s, it was routine to have 10 children. Okay, routine to have 10 children. If you go to a lot of societies where there's no birth control, that's pretty common to have at least 10 pregnancies. Okay, as soon as a woman will start, menstruating in those societies, she's pregnant within a year of that, and then she's either nursing or having a baby. At least in those societies, she would nurse then for 2, 3 years, sometimes 4 years. Okay, now Douglas MacArthur, I already went through that stuff. Undefended wealth is the main cause of war. So that's another reason why I think it's good for a woman to be a security guard or a police officer. She'll be much more able to protect herself, because I think the amount of bad treatment of women is dramatically going to go up. America's going to basically, I think, become, unfortunately, like other countries that are third world. And women in those countries are treated much worse. These old days of walking down the street by yourself, I think that's going to become a rarity. I remember watching a video about immigrants in France, and they were interviewed, and they had a mask on, and they said, we are going to PE, every female, Caucasian female, and we are going to BEH, then EAD, every Caucasian man. That's what they said, okay? So what I'm trying to say is, that is not very good, okay? That's going to make it much less safe to walk down a street in a big city. Okay, it's just a fact. It's already happened. Take a look at what's happening in a lot of the big cities. You will see this. You'll see, they have an open you-know-what down south, and there's just tons of homeless persons living in the streets, and it's not safe to walk down those streets. I can tell you, San Francisco was a terrible place back in the 1990s, and it had gotten much worse by the 1990s than it was in the 1980s even. Let's see. I would never go there. Never. I just consider it, a crap hole. When they say diversity is our strength, that's really a euphemism of big money for the Roman theory of divide and conquer. And the goal is to divide and conquer the proles. So what they want is everybody arguing and fussing, and that makes them very weak. The reason why they really hate Christianity is because Christianity unifies a population. What else can unify a variety of cultures, men, women, different ethnic groups, etc.? They love singing together in the church. It brings them all together. It provides a unified set of standards. You learn the same stories from the Bible. You have a shared culture. You can share jokes about that. And I know what it's like, because I went to a Catholic school for a while, and I had other family members that went to Catholic school more than I did. They had a shared sense of community. They knew each other. They had sporting teams. They played sports together. They had feast days. They went together. Everybody knew each other's families. They knew who were brothers and sisters of what families and stuff. And, I secretly went to church with my parents sometimes because I was hoping to see this girl who I liked, okay? And so what I'm trying to say was there was a sense of community, whereas I see nowadays very little sense of community. When I was a kid, my parents didn't need to arrange a play date. I could just walk out, start knocking on doors, and all these other families within a block of my house had children my age, and we'd play games. We'd play softball in the street or whatever we would do, or hang around, whatever we would do. There were tons of kids around, okay? I never had to go more than a block to find a bunch of kids my age and socialize with, okay? Let's see, what else? Being a fertility expert. Like I said, the younger generation of women is being intentionally sterilized. There's so many sterilizing chemicals in their food, their water, and their personal care products, et cetera, that infertility is off the charts. It's so much worse than people realize. it's not even funny how much worse it is. And it really raises the question of, they've been talking about the replenishment. Basically, the attitude of big money is, look, the Americans are a pain in the ass. They want freedom too much. They're too demanding. They want to be more wealthy than they deserve. They're really a bunch of serfs and slaves. Why don't we just, open the you-know-what down south and replace them with a bunch of people who will not want so much, who don't expect freedom, who don't expect to have any money. Just we'll get some cheap slaves. So I think that's where things are going. I hate to say it. I wish it wasn't. I would like America to be, the land of the free, and I wish America was wealthy like it used to be. It pisses me off that I'm twice as smart as my dad, but he got paid about 4 times as much as I do in equivalent dollars. Doctors used to make tons more money than they make nowadays. There's no comparison. Let's see, what else? Now, as far as academics, what about academics? My personality, I think I was born to be an academic and a scholar, also a wrestling coach, but I kind of screwed that up with my injuries. So what I'm trying to say, though, is I would want to do something academic. What I would maybe do, let's say as a young person and you like school and you're good at school and stuff, I would say keep on learning, keep on getting educated, but maybe stay in the periphery for a couple years and see which way things are going. Because I know what you're thinking. Oh, I'm an asshole. I wanted, being a doctor for myself, but now I'm telling you, you should hold off on one of those types of jobs. And what I'm trying to say is, you don't understand what's going on. I do much better than you do. Maybe not perfectly, but much better than you do probably. You young people don't tend to know very much. And what I'm trying to tell you is things are not the way they used to be. And it would be wise to just keep on getting educated, building skills, do something useful, but don't rush into a system that maybe is going to abuse you far worse than you could imagine. You could maybe be like a technical writer would be a good thing while you're constantly reading and staying educated for that job. A lot of things have changed and in a really, really bad way. Imagine like sports, okay? For a woman, it used to be, playing a sports in college or something was a fun thing. Nowadays, there's going to be some guy, some so-called woman who's not really a woman, and she's going to beat the crap out of you, okay? It's not even safe in a lot of bathrooms nowadays. You go in there, and there could be some big muscle-bound person who's going to abuse you, and you certainly have no privacy. So what I'm trying to say is the modern world, I think, lies to women. It tries to tell them, oh, you're much better off than ever. Your poor unfortunate grandmother had to be a slave to some husband of hers. Oh, isn't that terrible? You know what? She probably had a man taking care of her who she loved, and they had a nice family together. Whereas you guys, you're much more poor, and you're much more likely to be infertile, to never have a husband, to never have a child, to have sexually transmitted diseases. So I actually think things are much worse for you guys nowadays. So anyways, I hope this advice was helpful to you. The more you understand what's going on, the better chance you have to navigate it effectively. So anyways, good luck to you.